For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh. Today we are talking about grief. This is David Cronenberg's The Shrouds. So The Shrouds tells the story of a widower who, in the absence of his wife, invents a tombstone where you can actually have 3D imaging and can see your loved one in their current state. And one night, one of his cemeteries gets vandalized, and it leads along this plot of conspiracy that is just fascinating. Grief is a complicated thing, and I would expect nothing less of a movie that is trying to be the personification of grief to be any simpler than that. This movie is very complicated to kind of sum up. I'll be completely honest, I don't quite know my feelings on this film. I'm going to try and navigate them in this video for the sake of kind of coming up with a conclusive thing, but I think this is kind of one of those movies that is going to necessarily have to grow on me, and a movie that I'm probably going to have to watch a couple of times before ultimately kind of come across whether or not I truly love it or it's just kind of okay. But we're going to get through this together. It's really easy to tell that this is Cronenberg's most personal film to date. This film became a project that was birthed out of himself actually becoming a widower, and honestly explores a lot of those feelings that I imagine he felt. I love how vulnerable he is just getting in the script writing process. I won't say this is necessarily one of his best scripts or his most profound scripts that he's ever written, but the fact that he's just kind of laying it all out there is something that I both found fascinating, really loved, and also at the same time just really applaud and really respect. When I talk about necessarily the tone of the film, what I'm referring to about the script is this movie reminded me a lot of another Cronenberg movie just from the way that it's written and the way that certain dialogues are given and or are articulated, and that is Cosmopolis. Now, if you kind of know Cosmopolis, it is a Robert Pattinson starring film that is very tongue-in-cheek. It does have these very profound moments, but it kind of borders on satire. And there are definitely moments where this movie kind of borders on that satire. They're definitely tongue-in-cheek, kind of dark humor, but also at the same time, the genre of this is very hard to kind of nail down. And again, I'm fascinated by this movie and the things that are kind of birthed out of it, because again, these are all things that are being birthed out of a grieving process. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. And so if you're going to have a movie exploring that, especially a character that is going to explore that very topic and is going through that very topic so much so that he actually has built a career around it, this movie, I would just say, expect the unexpected, and Cronenberg delivers on that. This movie feels like a drama through and through. I know some people are calling this a horror movie. Some people are calling this a thriller. For me, it never felt like it got scary enough to be classified as a horror, but it also never got thrilling enough to really be considered a thriller. Like, there are moments where I'm like, okay, I can argue for like this sequence of events, especially where Guy Pearce's character ends up going, but the genre really kind of feels like it's somewhat all over the place. And again, I didn't necessarily have a problem with that. It's just really hard to kind of pinpoint to say it's one genre when, in essence, again, it feels very reminiscent of the grieving process. You know, because when you go through the grieving process and someone asks if you're okay, are you ever truly okay, or are we just kind of giving into societal niceties where we say, yeah, you know, I'm fine, I've got good days and I've got bad days? No, it's complicated, and we need to stop we need to normalize that it's complicated to go through the grieving process and to go through pain and hurt and emotions and ordeals. And dear God, I think I'm talking myself into liking this movie way more than I initially did. So maybe I don't need to watch this movie again to understand it. Let's talk about it more. I gotta say, it was Diane Kruger that really stole the show for me in terms of performances. Kruger plays two performances, and as Cassel's wife in this movie, during flashbacks, she just has this very commanding presence about her. Like, there's points in this movie that, like, I was on the verge of tears just because of how hard her performance hit. And her chemistry with Cassel is just absolutely impeccable. I think when their Cassel in and of himself is a fine performance, I really didn't really love it one way or another, but when he was on the screen with Kruger, their chemistry just had an electricity about him that it was just the best parts of the movie for me. Then on the flip side, you have Kruger's other performance in this, where she plays the sister of Cassel's wife in this, and I gotta say, even what she does with her, it's completely different. It's this very spunky, almost kind of where a lot more of the comedic elements come in, and I just kind of thought the way that she balances both performances, both from Cronenberg's direction, but also just the way that she brings these two characters to life and makes them incredibly distinct, not only from a visual perspective, but also from a just a genre perspective. I thought was just, again, exceptional. She just knocks it out of the performance here. I think for me, my biggest problem with the Shrouds ended up being its pacing. There are definitely certain sequences that feel like they definitely drag on way further than they need to. There are storylines and characters within here that, in the grand scheme of things, if you took these characters out, not only would it create a tighter narrative, but also at the same time, I think it would have made a much more fascinating character study of Vincent Cassel's character and his grieving process. But also at the same time, I think it would have also just made an all-around better movie. But with that said, I am ready to put this one to rest, as they say, and run it through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give the Shrouds a 4 out of 5. I think overall this movie definitely is messy, but it's an intentional mess. And I think that's what makes it brilliant. I think this is Cronenberg's most vulnerable and daring project that he has done, either in his career or that we've seen from him in a very long time. Diane Kruger absolutely steals the show for me. She was absolutely outstanding as in a dual performance, and this movie's biggest hurdle is its tonal shifts, but also, most importantly, the way that it just embodies these really long, drawn-out scenes, and also providing us with characters that aren't essential to the plot whatsoever. And this movie just kind of feels a little bit bloated in certain parts, and could have really used from some shortening down. Shrouds is now playing in limited release, so check your local listings and click the links in the show notes below to check it out. But if you've seen it, what did you think? Comment below and let me know. I've heard from a lot of people that you either really love this movie or you really hate it, so I'm kind of curious what you think about it. But let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content here at Victims and Villains, we create content like what you're watching right now, simply to talk about mental health through pop culture and simply eradicate the stigma surrounding mental health. And so we do this portion of the video called Mental Health Moment, where we will pull a theme of mental health out of the film, which we're talking about, in hopes to accomplish that. I've kind of hinted at it throughout the course of this video and throughout my review, because there really isn't any way that you can talk about a movie like The Shrouds and not talk about grief. And I think, again, what makes this film so brilliant is that it feels like it's an intentional mess to talk about just the really messiness that comes along with the grieving process, and to really double down and ensure people that there's no right or wrong way to grieve. so I'm not really going to kind of make this long and drawn out. I'm just going to say grieve at your own pace and grieve in the way that you want to grieve. For David Cronenberg, it was writing and creating this movie. That was part of his grieving process. For Vincent Cassel's character in this movie, it was watching his wife's body decay. And that might sound morbid to some people, but there's kind of beauty and there's kind of peace in that. And again, it comes back down to this principle of there's no right way and there's no wrong way to grieve. Allow people to grieve in the way that they want to grieve, and also grieve in the pace and the timing that they want to grieve in. So if you're going through the grieving process right now, or you know someone that is, just encourage them that it's okay to take their time and grieve in the manner that they see fit, and that is going to bring them peace at the end of the day. If you or someone you know is currently struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, click the links in our show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. The Shrouds is now playing in limited release. Once again, check the local listings. They are in the links in the show notes below. And down there, you will also find links to our social media, podcast network, more movie reviews like this, how to support us via Patreon, as well as Paramount Plus, that follow button, and once again, our mental health resource library. So until next time, remember to keep it classy and keep it spooky.